Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of VENDO Velocity. Excited to dive into a few topics here. I know we haven't had Russell and Phil on the live podcast since we were talking about P&L. So whenever we have these guys on, we go back to the basics a little, a few fundamentals that I think a lot of people miss within the industry, but are very important that you're on top of because they can be detrimental to your business if you aren't aware of some of Amazon's more fundamental programs, including things like featured offer, and which is also known as buy box, and also subscribe and save, which a lot of brands do take advantage of, but not everyone knows the benefits of. So, Russell and Phil, without further ado, if we could go ahead and just go through introductions for those who might not have tuned into our P&L episode previously, which I highly recommend. But Russell, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Lainey. I'm Russell. I'm the lead data manager here at Vendo. So basically, anything data related, you can kind of look to Phil and I. Phil, you want to also do an intro yourself?
Yeah. So I'm a data analyst. I work very closely with Russell and Delaney on a lot of the different different data stuff on Amazon. We're the data guys.
Yes, they are the data guys. So we'll be breaking down a few key data points that are in your business reports, and you might think that they're a bit hidden, but again, if you aren't winning the buy box or the featured offer, or you're not competitively offering subscribe and save, that will have an impact on your business. So those are the two main topics that we'll be covering here today, and a few of the nuances with each of those. So first, I'll start off with you, Phil. If you could just define for our audience, what is featured offer, also known as buy box?
Yeah, so featured offer, which Amazon has kind of changed the name to more recently, is or formerly known as buy box, is pretty much when you get to a product's product detail page on the top right. If there are multiple offerings within the listing, the featured offer is one that is pretty straightforward, featured on the top right. So that gives pretty much a huge advantage compared to other sellers on the listing. We see that some stats have shown like anywhere from 80 to 90% of Amazon purchases are made through the featured offers. So it definitely is a huge advantage to have that, and super important to find ways to win that featured offer.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then can you expand a little bit on just how does Amazon determine this featured offer? Is there a certain algorithmic formula where specific factors come into play when determining this? Are there only a few? Can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, for sure. So it, like you said, it is an algorithmically driven button on Amazon. So multiple things that are considered when Amazon figures out if the who wins the featured offer or buy box, right? So some of those really include, so first and foremost, the seller must be on a professional selling plan. So that is just the monthly subscription that you pay to Amazon to sell. So which majority of sellers do have. Second thing, price is a huge factor. So Amazon does want to give the customer always the best experience in terms of purchasing. So not only does the product have to be first of all legit, but the price has to be competitive. So you'll see sometimes like maybe stuff that you order maybe not weekly, but monthly stuff that you like toothpaste, whatever it is, you'll see price fluctuate, and a lot of times that's kind of due to different competitors on the listing adjusting their price to win the buy box. So price is a huge one. Next is shipping time and inventory, and so that majority is going to be determined by if you're selling on FBA or FBM. And FBA is fulfilled by Amazon, is pretty much where you send your product into Amazon and Amazon handles the fulfillment for you. And that's when you'll see the 1 or 2 day shipping, depending on where you're at. FBM, fulfilled by merchant, is pretty much when you're selling on Amazon, but you're fulfilling via your own warehouse or a 3PL. So typically we'll see stronger lead times via FBA, and that's going to help you win the buy box over a FBM competitor. The next thing is going to be seller rating. So this will be the rating for your seller account and not necessarily the product itself. So if you have a strong seller rating, which customers can leave after purchasing from your store, then that also does have an impact on whether or not you win that featured offer. And then kind of tying very closely to that is essentially like your how old your seller account is, how much history you've had. All those things are super important to winning the buy box.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one thing you specifically touched on was FBM versus FBA. And we know that there can be a few detrimental metrics that can really affect buy box as well if you're not keeping these in line, just as far as shipping times, cancellation rates, etc. So, Russell, if you could expand a little bit on some of those key FBM metrics that sellers need to make sure that they are paying attention to, but also controlling within their warehouses, that would be great.
Yeah, so the main thing is, shipping time, right? I would say that's probably the one that we see our customers get dinged the most. Because obviously Amazon wants to make sure that if you promise a certain shipping time, then you stick to it. So, and you have the ability to kind of determine, right? Like Amazon lets you select what is your shipping time to your consumer, and that's what shows up on the front. So the key is that you have to make sure that you also can evaluate your own warehouses and your own fulfillment and see whether you're able to guarantee. Sure, if you can ship even faster, that's obviously best. But if you think you're going to sometimes ship a little slower, or there are other issues that might come into play, then you definitely want to select a longer timeline, because what Amazon does, it's a percentage, right? It's a rate of shipping. So obviously you want to ship the consumer in time, but also you want to ship your product there intact, right? If you start seeing customers submit returns, refunds, that kind of thing to Amazon, saying like, oh, I got a damaged product, and sometimes it's unfortunate, but you'll also get other sellers who will buy your product and submit claims and things like that. So that's something that we always keep an eye on. But yeah, basically, once you get over a certain threshold when it comes to defect rates and things like that, then you start getting dinged, and then a lot of times your offer will just get suppressed outright. And then you have to kind of submit cases to Amazon and go through kind of that entire process with the POA, just to ensure that that's not going to happen again. And Amazon just really tight with this. So generally, we do suggest that if you're able to use FBA, just because it clears up a lot of these problems. And Amazon does, for example, if a consumer puts a comment, under your product listing and a rating saying like, oh, this product was shipped badly, blah, blah, blah. Amazon will actually take responsibility for that in a comment, and, they'll take that. That won't be a red mark on your ledger. So FBA tends to be what we suggest, because Amazon is pretty good with that stuff as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Two things specifically that Russell had touched on there. One, you can update your handling time on an item level. So that's often something that, Amazon or sellers will take just Amazon standard shipping templates into account, where they don't realize that all of that can be altered on an item level if your warehouse needs more time. Now, as Phil was talking about earlier, and Russell had just alluded to, shipping times are important for winning that buy box. So if you expand or extend that handling time too much, then you're going to lower your chances of winning that buy box. And on top of that, even if you do win that buy box, you'll probably see lower conversion rates, because the customer is seeing that extended ship window when they go to make a purchase. And given that everyone wants things from Amazon in 2 days, it takes a week for that item to actually be shipped to the customer. There might be some lost conversion there because of that. So Phil, talk a little bit about some of our other strategies specifically around winning the buy box or the featured offer.
Yeah, for sure. So I think always price. So shipping time and price are probably the two biggest factors. So shipping time, as we've mentioned, finding ways to switch over from FBM to FBA, or just finding ways to essentially beat out your competitors, right? So The next thing is going to be price. So price, unfortunately, there are times when we do see third-party sellers on the listing, and kind of alluding to that, if there are times when we are able to remove third-party sellers, let's say if they're selling your product without permission, or if they have essentially selling the wrong product or selling old product, stuff like that. But in the case that they do have permission to sell your product and have gone through the right avenues to attain it, price is going to be one of the main factors in terms of determining who wins the buy box, right? So let's say you have a product that's priced at $19.99, and your competitor comes in and reprices their offering at $19.98, and what that really means is that they do have that 1 cent advantage. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to win the buy box every time, but if, let's say, everything we talked about before, where everything matches up with FBA shipping, with the seller history being very similar, and very similar seller ratings, then price is going to be really the main factor determining that. So it will kind of flip back and forth, but it definitely does impact the buy box there. So making sure that the listing is offering the most competitive price is going to be super advantageous to gaining the buy box. And then now, with that being said, we know that there are different map pricing things to adhere to. So that's also another kind of topic that we can come back to at some point.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And what Phil's saying there, basically, when you do not win the buy box or featured offer, oftentimes Amazon will send you a pricing alert directly in Seller Central, and it will basically tell you you are no longer winning the featured offer, and this is the price that is winning the featured offer. So oftentimes that price isn't even on Amazon, it's off Amazon. So what Phil was saying about brand registry and protecting your channel, this is one of the most important pieces of being an Amazon seller, is controlling your distribution. Because if you don't have strong control of that, as Phil said, we could do test buys, we can send cease and desist to these sellers, but there's no guarantee that those sellers will be taken off Amazon, because after all, it's an open marketplace. So unless they're selling expired product, or unless the product isn't what it says it is, then it's going to be much more difficult to take them off of Amazon. Amazon's cracking down on brand registry specifically too, so you used to be able to more easily file infringement claims against these sellers, which is no longer the case. You still can, but it's much more difficult to actually get them off of the listing. So Russell, talk a little bit about losing the featured offer. What does that mean, and what are some of the main impacts?
Yeah. So if you lose your featured offer, it doesn't mean that you still can't sell, right? Like, obviously there's no automatic, one-click shop button on the page when the customer goes to it. But technically, customers can still click on see all buying options, and they can see you down there as far as like being able to buy, from there. So, if we're talking about customers who might have bought from you before and they come back to your listing, there's still the odds that they'll buy from you. But of course, like, because the customer is just so focused on pricing, like they'll end up going with the lowest pricing. Like, most customers aren't savvy enough to know who they're buying from. So even if you're the brand, and most people would prefer to like just buy straight from whomever it is produce the product rather than a third party seller. Mostly customers aren't going to be smart enough to do that. So you're going to lose some sales that way. And then the other thing is, if you lose a featured buy box offer, we can kind of talk a little bit about SNS now. You're not going to have the automatic SNS button there as well. And, obviously SNS is one of the biggest tools as far as Amazon is concerned, especially if your products are repurchasable products, just because it does get your customers into that cycle of just getting those purchases from you very regularly. They actually have to manually cancel their orders that Amazon automatically puts into play. So obviously that just makes it much easier to get that repeat purchase from the customer. And so you're going to lose that featured offer as far as SNS is concerned. And then also just from a ranking standpoint and a lot of different things, like it's just going to hurt you as far as your listing is concerned, especially if, let's say, there's various ways that you can lose buy box, right? One is you just lose it to another seller on the page so your listing will still be generating sales, and so you're not going to lose too much momentum that way. But if it's, let's say, price matching off of Amazon, like map pricing, other retail channels, things like that, and it's a full suppression of the listing, now the sales on the listing will tank completely. And now you're talking about like actually losing position compared to other listings, other competitors on platform. And that's going to have a longer tailed effect on your performance overall, right? Because even if you win your buy box back, now you're suddenly, rank lower than other competitors. Now you're seeing less sales. You're going to have to spend more to kind of regenerate those positions. So that's really the hard part where, buy box, just having that at least 90 to 95% buy box is really key in terms of not just generating the sales themselves, but also just maintaining your overall health on Amazon as a brand and being competitive.
That's a great point, and that's a great transition to SNS too. So Phil, why don't we dive into that a little bit more? If you could give an example specifically of what Russell was saying, the relationship between buy box and SNS. Let's take a listing that has multiple third-party sellers. I know we've seen, and this happens all the time, but walk us through that a little bit more in depth of how that works in terms of we see multiple sellers on the listing, but because of an SNS offer, this is what happened.
Right. So first off, let's kind of describe real quick who qualifies for SNS and what products, right? So, mainly who. So you're able to offer SNS once you're enrolled into brand registry. So this also is a reason why Delaney mentioned that brand registry is so important for the seller. But having SNS, pretty much you need to be enrolled in brand registry, have a seller feedback of 4.7 or higher, be on a professional selling plan, be an active F.K.A. seller for at least 3 months, and a healthy in-stock rate of at least 85%. So with this, as Lane mentioned, there are a lot of listings where sometimes we see upwards of 15 to 20, sometimes 25 sellers, all competing for that buy box. Now, pricing and so ship time is always going to be one of the main drivers along with pricing. But having SNS gives you some wiggle room. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're selling the product at $15.50, for example, right? And your competitor is selling it at $14.99. So what happens there is that because of the pricing, your competitor is now winning the buy box. Now, what we've seen more recently is that Amazon has kind of updated where your competitor will win the buy box, but underneath you'll be able to see the SNS option if your price minus your discount is more competitive than the $14.99. So, for example, if your product is at $15.50 and you are offering a 10% SNS discount, right? So your product actually, comes in at $13.95. So at that point, your SNS offer is technically more competitive than your the third parties that's selling on your listing, and this will give you an option to compete with him. So that is definitely one advantage of having SNS is that you're able to compete with your SNS offer as opposed to just your true offer, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and that's kind of a way around this because I think a lot of brands might have a bit more apprehension as far as offering SNS, but it's a good workaround for winning the buy box. Now, of course, there's a maximum SNS discount that you're going to be able to offer. So, and in that term, you want to make sure you're not winning the buy box by that much, and it's still going to have an impact on your overall sales. and conversion rate. So something to keep a close eye on. But SNS gives you a bit of an avenue to where your featured offer is still being shown there. And then, as we know, a few months ago, Amazon also released SNS coupons. So just another avenue in which Amazon's really leaning in to this channel. On the Vendor Central side too, they've enhanced their dashboard for SNS a decent amount as well. So this is a program that's continuing to evolve on Amazon's side. If you are a consumable product or any repeat purchase friendly product, I know Russell and Phil track customer acquisition very in depth on our side, as well as lifetime value, and SNS plays a very large role in that. So all great insights, guys. Really appreciate you sharing them. I want to take a little bit of time to just go over a few of the major updates that have come down on the Amazon side just in the past week. I know we had Larnie on the podcast last week to talk about the new inventory placement fees, which have been hitting a lot of sellers depending on if they're doing Amazon optimized shipments or partial shipments or just sending to one location. That's something to look out for. We've built templates on our side to understand with shipping fees and placement fees, which is going to be the most inexpensive route. And again, there's advantages of both, as Larnie went through last week. But for the most part, the Amazon optimized shipment may be the least expensive route. It just might take a bit more time because you are shipping to multiple locations. But one of the bigger updates for this week was around coupons. And this is interesting because starting on March 12th, so a week ago from today, there are new pricing requirements for coupons. So coupons are still required to have a discount percentage between 5 and 50% off, but they will also be required to have a sales history, products will be, before they're eligible to run a coupon. So this is the biggest change, given that a lot of sellers' launch strategies might have been to implement a coupon at launch. And now there's different was prices metrics that you need to make sure that you're adhering to. So what you'll see is if you're currently running a coupon for new products, they might have been suppressed given that maybe you increased your prices or that 90-day medium price has taken full effect and it's now removing your overall coupon for a new product. So Russell, talk a little bit about this. As far as coupons go, what do you see for this change? Is it, do you think, a step in the right direction, or do you feel like it is going to have an impact on the honeymoon period or other now that items need to have sales history in order to implement these coupons?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it needs to have sales history to implement, like, that's always a bit of a problem. It kind of depends on your brand, right? You know, if you're a brand where you know that, you know, let's say there's various types of brands that come on Amazon when you launch a new product, right? If you have a lot of sales history on Amazon, if you have a lot of brand awareness, like, you know, it would have been more helpful to just be able to launch right off the bat with the coupons. That's usually helpful. I mean, you know, but, you know, also depends on your fulfillment and what you can do there. So there's a lot of pieces that kind of put into play. Like, we obviously, from our perspective, like, we prefer just being able to have it like as an option, like right off the bat. That's always a little easier. But for most brands, it probably isn't that big of a deal. But it's more for like brands where you know you're going to have massive velocity off the bat, especially for a new product launch, where, you know, that's just kind of a bit of a lost opportunity. But otherwise, you know, usually it's fine to kind of wait for that period, get all your eggs in place, and then kind of go from there, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. We'll learn more and more about this initiative. I think we might see sellers employ more creative solutions to test price just without this coupon at launch. And from a reviews perspective, we'll see, because I know those sellers who enroll products in Vine, they'll often put a coupon on their product just because sometimes Vine reviewers are a bit critical of price. And so offering that savings, even though that the Vine reviewers aren't necessarily receiving that savings since they're getting the product, is another thing psychologically that allows different sellers to make the price or the offer look a little bit more enticing. And then the second largest update of this week is that Prime Day is around the corner somewhat, but dates are starting to be announced for inventory. So the in-stock cutoff date for Prime Day and having your products arrive into F.K.A. is no later than June 20th. Now, last year, that cutoff date was a week prior to June 20th. So it was on June 14th. So we still expect Prime Day to be either in that second or third week of July, but it does seem like this is right around the corner. So we'll definitely have both Russell and Phil on the line in a couple weeks here once the Prime Day deal structures get announced, so that we could go through data tracking and how we look at Prime Day pre and post as well. But that's an exciting new initiative too. So something to start planning for. There's always a new marketing event. I know we're in the middle of Amazon's spring sale right now. TikTok Shop spring sale starts on the 25th and goes through the 30th. TikTok Shop also announced a new ad type yesterday, so we're really excited for that specifically. That is product shopping ads. Those are very similar to product listing ads on Google, which we know perform great. So very excited to start testing that as well, and we'll report back with some metrics there. But Russell, Phil, leave our audience with one last tidbit from a data perspective. What is the top thing that you believe brands should be looking at around this time of year on Amazon in terms of their analytics?
Right now, this time of year, obviously you're gonna be leading into summertime, so we're kind of switching up the seasons. A lot of big events, Amazon driven or otherwise, are kind of coming up. So make sure you win your buy box. Make sure your pricing strategy is in place. Make sure you have all your ducks in a row. We're kind of moving into playoffs and Super Bowl season pretty much as far as Amazon selling is concerned.
Absolutely, Phil. Anything to add?
Yeah, and these are super organic, because that was kind of my same answer. But to kind of add on to that, I think definitely buy box is a huge thing, and I think, just in case we didn't mention, something that Amazon does scrape other major online retailers, so it's always really a great practice to make sure that you are aligned in terms of pricing across a lot of the different channels there, if you are selling in other retail markets.
That's a great point. And then combining their 2 points, it's especially important because this time of year, there are a lot of other retailers that offer competitive sales to Prime Day and others. So where other retailers are testing price, you will likely see Amazon follow, or if it's not on the 1P side, then at least flag to you that there's a more competitive price in the market and try to get you to match. So again, having a very cohesive pricing strategy across all of the retailers you sell against are very important, offering SNS and winning that featured offer. But thank you all for tuning in to Velocity this week. We will talk to you next week. Bye, everyone.